was sitting in my father's living room, staring at a photo of myself on the mantel. Me at 6 years old, grinning with cake on my face. Every picture in that house was the same. Just me. For 28 years, I thought I was the only one who belonged there. The only child. The center of his world. My name is Claire. My mother died when I was 7, so it was just Dad and me. He was never warm or affectionate, but he provided. When he bought me my first car, that was his way of saying he cared. When he showed up at my graduation in a suit that no longer fit, that was his way of saying he was proud. We never said, "I love you," but I told myself it was fine, because I was all he had, and he was all I had. Being an only child defined me. Every holiday, every photo, every empty chair at dinner reinforced it. People said I must be spoiled, and maybe I was, but more than spoiled, I was alone, and I told myself that made me special. But cracks were always there. The late nights he brushed off as work. The phone calls taken in the garage, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Questions about his past he waved away with, "That's not important." I ignored it, because I had the proof. Every frame in the house told the same story. Or at least, I thought it did. One Thursday evening, as I curled on the couch with leftover Chinese food, a knock shook the door. Not polite, not hesitant, steady, certain, like the person already knew they belonged inside. When I opened it, a young woman stood there. Same brown eyes, same tilt of the chin. For a moment, it felt like looking at my reflection in warped glass. She didn't smile. She didn't stutter. She just said, clear as glass, "My name is Hannah. I'm your father's daughter, too." And in one sentence, my entire identity cracked in half. The world tilted sideways the moment she spoke. I laughed in her face. "You've got the wrong house. Wrong family." But she just stood there, calm, steady hands gripping her bag. "Ask him," she said simply. "Ask Dad." Her certainty rattled me more than the claim itself. I slammed the door, my heart pounding. Scam, I told myself. Some fraud, looking for money. But when Dad came home that night, I couldn't hold it in. "Some girl showed up today," I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice shook. "She said she's your daughter. Her name's Hannah." For a split second, his face drained of color. Then the mask slid back into place. But I saw it. And in that moment, I knew. "Dad?" My voice cracked. "Tell me she's lying." He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. "It was a long time ago. Before your mother passed, I made mistakes." The room spun. Mistakes? That's what he called another child? Before I could speak, another knock rattled the door. Hannah again, this time with proof. She laid it on the table, a birth certificate with his name under father. Photos of him cradling her as a baby, his arm around a woman I'd never seen. Letters in his handwriting, full of apologies for missed birthdays, promises of money, vows to make it up next time. It wasn't just a story. It was undeniable. I stared at the evidence, then at him. He couldn't even meet my eyes. Everything I believed about my life, being his only, being his center, collapsed in a single evening. For 28 years, I thought the empty chairs, the photos, the traditions proved I was special. But staring at Hannah, I realized I hadn't been the only child. I'd just been the only one kept in the dark. I always thought being an only child made me unique. It was my identity, my proof that my father's world, however distant or cold, revolved around me. But in one night, that identity shattered. I stared at the birth certificate, the photographs, the letters Hannah spread across the table. My whole childhood flickered through my mind. Christmas mornings with only my name on the gifts, vacations with 2 plane tickets, empty chairs at family dinners. All of it felt like a lie. "Why?" I whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dad's eyes dropped. "I wanted to protect you. You'd already lost your mother. You didn't need more complications." "Protect me." The words burned. "Protect me?" I snapped. From what? Knowing the truth? From realizing I wasn't the only one? The argument spiraled fast. Years of silence between us erupted. I accused him of lying, of shaping my life around a half-truth. He accused me of being ungrateful, of not understanding adult mistakes. And through it all, Hannah sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. When our voices hit their peak, she finally spoke. "I didn't come here to fight," she said softly. "I'm not here for money. I want to know my family." Her calmness only stung worse. For her, this was a beginning. For me, it was an ending. The fallout was immediate. Word spread fast. Once neighbors saw Dad with Hannah, once relatives noticed her at his side, it became gossip fuel. My phone lit up with pitying calls. We had no idea. At work, whispers followed me in the hallway, coworkers giving me the look you save for someone caught in a scandal. Even at the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. The humiliation burned deeper than the betrayal. It wasn't just that I wasn't special anymore. It was that everyone knew it. I wasn't the cherished only child. I was the daughter of a man who cheated, lied, and hid a second family in the shadows. And Hannah, no matter how softly she spoke, no matter how much she insisted she only wanted connection, was living proof that I had never been the center of his world. I wasn't just losing my identity, I was watching it get rewritten in front of everyone else. My father wasted no time trying to stitch us into some picture of a family. The very next week, he was planning dinners. "We should all sit together," he insisted, as if food could erase decades of secrets. He arranged barbecues, Sunday lunches, even movie nights, desperate to paint a new portrait where Hannah and I existed side by side, but every invitation felt less like bonding and more like replacement. Because the more he pulled Hannah in, the more I felt myself being pushed out. At one of those dinners, I sat stiff at the table, stabbing at food I couldn't taste. Meanwhile, Hannah leaned in close to him, laughing at his jokes, her hand brushing his arm like they'd done it 100 times before. She knew stories I'd never heard, like how he got the scar on his shoulder during a camping trip, or the name of a dish he always ordered when he was young. I sat there in silence, realizing she knew him in ways I didn't. It wasn't just information, it was belonging. She walked through our house as if it were hers, opening cabinets without asking, moving with an ease that made me feel like the guest. Once I caught her pausing at the photo wall, her fingers brushing over a frame of me as a toddler on Dad's shoulders. She smiled, not curiously, not wistfully, but knowingly, as if she'd always had a place there, waiting for the picture to shift. And the worst part? He let it happen. He encouraged her closeness, laughed louder with her than I'd ever heard, told her stories he'd never shared with me. I sat on the sidelines, invisible in my own life. Every time he looked at her, I saw the expression I'd spent years chasing in his eyes. Pride, joy, connection. And it broke me, because now that look wasn't mine alone. I wasn't the only child anymore. I wasn't the center. I was just one of two. It started with a cough. Nothing dramatic, just a rasp at the end of sentences. Then came the weight loss, the fatigue, the routine doctor's visits he brushed off. I knew better. I'd watched those broad shoulders carry the world my whole life, and now they were shrinking under something unseen. The diagnosis landed like a hammer. Cancer. Advanced. Months, not years. Grief hit me hard, but alongside it came a shameful emotion. Panic. Because suddenly, every conversation turned toward what happens after. And for the first time, inheritance became part of the air we breathed. One evening, he sat us down, me and Hannah across from him, the room heavy with silence. His voice was weak, but his words were deliberate. "I want both of you taken care of. You're my daughters. Both of you. Whatever I leave behind, it will be shared equally." The words cut like glass. My whole life I'd believed it would be mine. The house, the business, the legacy he built. Proof that being his only child meant something. And in one sentence, half of it was gone. I couldn't hide my reaction. She shows up out of nowhere, and suddenly half my life isn't mine anymore? My voice cracked, sharp and raw. Hannah flinched but didn't back down. "I never asked for money. I don't want to take anything from you." I laughed bitterly. "Then why are you here? Why now?" Her calm only fueled my rage, but the real blow came later, when we sat in the lawyer's office. The mahogany table, the crisp papers, the fresh ink. It was already done. The will had been rewritten, everything split down the middle. 50-50. I gripped the chair so hard my hands ached. He hadn't just spoken it, he'd carved it into law. Dad looked at me then, eyes tired, almost pleading. This is fair. This is what's right. But to me, fairness felt like theft. Because when you've lived your entire life believing you're the only heir, equal doesn't feel equal. It feels like losing half of yourself. I couldn't sleep after the lawyer's office. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the signatures, the words 50-50. It wasn't grief keeping me awake, it was suspicion. So I started digging. At first it was simple searches, Hannah's name, old addresses, scraps of online records, but nothing added up. Jobs listed in 2 cities at once, employment dates that overlapped, social profiles that appeared, disappeared, then reappeared under new names. It looked less like a normal life and more like a trail built to confuse. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. She hadn't just stumbled into our lives after Dad got sick. She'd been circling for years. Neighbors from her past mentioned an older man in a suit visiting her, dropping off envelopes. Former classmates recalled her talking about a father who was successful but far away. Old friends hinted she'd always known about another family, but never named me. Piece by piece, it clicked. Hannah hadn't just discovered me when she knocked on my door. She had known I existed all along. She'd been waiting, and her timing wasn't coincidence. She came forward when Dad was at his weakest. Guilty, dying, desperate to tie up loose ends. The realization made me sick, because it wasn't just her existence that upended my life. It was the calculation behind it. She hadn't appeared to build a family. She'd appeared to secure a place in his legacy. And suddenly, the story I'd told myself, that this was fate, a cruel twist of chance, crumbled. This wasn't chance. It was strategy. The next family dinner was unbearable. Dad, frail but insistent, wanted us all at the same table. His skin looked gray under the light, but he forced a smile, urging conversation. Hannah played along, sharing another childhood story, how he once promised to teach her to fish but never did. Dad chuckled, apologizing decades too late. That's when I snapped. "Funny," I said, slamming my glass down. "You never promised me that. Guess I wasn't the only one you forgot." Silence. Hannah's eyes locked on mine, steady. Dad's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but only coughed, then choked, collapsing forward. The ambulance came. Chaos blurred the night. And just like that, my father never came home again. Grief should have been enough. But I couldn't leave it there. Not with so many lies still gnawing at me. I dug through his records, desperate for answers. That's when I found the transfers. Regular payments stretching back decades. Money funneled quietly to Hannah and her mother, while I sat at home thinking every dollar he earned was for me. The betrayal twisted deeper when one of his old business partners finally cracked under my questioning. "He always knew," the man admitted. "He kept her comfortable. He thought it was better this way. I only encouraged her to step forward when he was dying, made things simpler for me financially." His words hollowed me out, because the cruelest twist wasn't Hannah. It was him. My father hadn't just slipped once, long ago. He had lived 2 lives, raising me in one world, funding hers in another. And I realized then the true betrayal wasn't her arrival at my door. It was his silence all along. After the funeral, I walked through my father's house, the same walls I grew up in. The photos of me still lined the shelves, but they didn't feel like proof anymore. They felt like props in a story he staged, one where half the truth had been erased. The estate, the accounts, the house, it all felt tainted, divided evenly on paper, but split long before in reality. Money was never the real theft. It was trust. I wish I could hate Hannah completely, but I can't. She didn't choose to grow up fatherless, waiting for scraps of recognition, any more than I chose to grow up believing I was enough. We were both living half-lives, edited by the same man who thought silence was protection. But silence doesn't protect. It corrodes. Now, when I sit at his table, I try to remember the father I thought I had, the man at graduations, the provider who showed love through responsibility. But those memories are blurred, distorted by secrets I can't unknow. I thought being an only child made me special. Turns out it just made me blind. Sometimes the family you thought was yours was never really yours at all.